Ladies and gentlemen, our second keynote speaker is a professor at the School of Law, University of Geneva. She is also professor of law at Texas A&M University School of Law, Transatlantic Technology Law Fellow at Stanford University, and Distinguished Fellow at the Royal University of Law and Economics in Phnom Penh, Cambodia. She is a dedicated teacher and a prolific scholar. She has extensively published in the area of intellectual property law, both in English and in Italian. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Professor Irene Calboli.
So, good morning, everybody, and thank you again to the organizer, to the university, to you all for the invitation and for addressing such an important topic today. I, for a change, don't have slides because I would like to keep, this conversation a bit interactive. So you should feel free to ask questions also throughout the presentation. As it has been mentioned, I am a professor of intellectual property. I specifically teach primarily trademarks, patents, geographical indications, and the like. I have been working considerably with your beautiful country's institution. I am currently a visiting international professor at the University of Pajajaran, and I work very closely with Universitas Indonesia as well. I've been to Indonesia many times, and I reside in Singapore. As my co-panelist and previous speaker mentioned, we are indeed in a time of exceptional, environment in many ways. Unfortunately, this exception is becoming the rule. We have seen our world changing, and as many of you know, our everyday life has profoundly changed. We are the lucky one that can access technology and can continue to do, even though to the same extent, but to almost a complete extent, our work. But certainly, this pandemic has proven that there are two worlds, one that has access to lots of vaccines, access to a lot of technology, and one who does not. There are various hiccups in the international global supply chain. I don't know if you have read, companies are stockpiling items for Christmas because there's going to be more disruption in the shipping services because I'm saying Christmas because this is one of the most, particularly in the West, shopping season. And so this is largely caused by COVID. So the question is, and this is the question that this conference would like to try to put to the table, is how can the law shape any of the responses to extraordinary circumstances? And I think this specific pandemic that is the first and hopefully the last in our lifetime has really highlighted the weakness of the international community in addressing this pandemic in a way that is efficient and safe and promoting solution for everybody. We have international institutions that are meant to be weak because they can't really take away too much in national sovereignty, but certainly have not been able to address the problem forcefully for lack of funds, for bureaucracy, for politics. The WHO has clearly proven, going back and forth on a variety of issues, not to be, reliable in many ways. Now, they try to help, but in many ways, for a lot of reasons, they've not been able to be the leader that perhaps the world needed. Developed countries have developed some vaccines. They have hoarded these vaccines. Developing countries have far less access to vaccines, and that's a major problem because, as we know now, we have all, at least here in Singapore, we have been, I don't want to say back to square one, but the world is very much battling the very contagious Delta variant. And if we have the Delta variant, it's because, India didn't have enough vaccine. Now, India in itself took very poor, perhaps, national policies in allowing mingling, in allowing people going out when they should not have. But when you have a country with 1.3 billion people, you can only do so much. And the fact that there were less access to vaccine in a certain jurisdiction has created a variant, and the variant now is jeopardizing the work of the vaccine in the rest of the world. Now we are really seeing, the main problem that can come from Africa. Indonesia has seen, a major rise in cases, and lots of people unfortunately have died. And now Indonesia is getting a bit more vaccine, but certainly lags behind, other countries in the numbers. So why do I say all that? It's because this pandemic has clearly proven a problem in access. A problem in access to the remedies to this disease. So do we have vaccines equitably shared? No. Do we have education? Do we have technology equitably shared across the world? No. Now, we are getting better than, say, 20, 30 years ago, but we are still seeing major gaps. And so, while I very much, sympathize with some of the views that my previous speaker, my fellow speaker was saying, now we see international students, international professor, people speaking on Zoom, left and right. This is true, but this also helps those who are at the top, being at the top and consolidating position at the top. I think it's really important to understand that we need to have an equitable distribution of technology, an equitable distribution of medicine, an equitable access. And this pandemic is really proving that we need to do more to give to people access to health and access to education and technology. So the question is, how can and should the law do that? Well, again, going back to the international framework, we have some instruments. In my field, intellectual property, there's been a lot of discussion about the so-called World Trade Organization TRIPS agreement waiver for intellectual property protection for any IP-related issue related to the vaccine and treatment for the disease for COVID-19. The issue of the vaccine at this stage is not very much the patent issue, it's the issue of manufacturing capacity. And so, many countries today don't really have patent protection for this vaccine. And so theoretically, they could copy the vaccine. So if Indonesia would like tomorrow to start producing the vaccine, could, in theory, same many developing countries, but simply put, there is no ability to do so because of the lack of infrastructure, the lack of technology capability. And so this is again back the question about building capacity in technology transfer, building capacity in vaccine manufacturing, and so on. And so again, the international law can do more to provide the infrastructure to share more equitably. Of course, the legal infrastructure is just the beginning, because then you can have the most perfect infrastructure, but if you don't have the policies and the content to put in the infrastructure, there is not much that can happen. But these are all questions that the international community should very carefully assess at the international level. And then we have the regional level. ASEAN has not really discussed access to medicine, access to health. ASEAN is supposed to be an economic community, is an economic community, and there has been very little discussion of sharing information, sharing technology, sharing access to medicine. ASEAN is discussing ASEAN e-commerce platform, but there's been nothing discussed really about access to technology, internet capacity for student access, distance learning, particularly for countries that have less access, say Laos, say Myanmar and Cambodia and so on. Now, these countries have very good capacity in certain cities, but certainly don't have good capacity in the rural area. I would say the same for Indonesia. I would say the same for Malaysia. And so, all these questions beg, again, a profound step back in critical assessment of a lot of these institutions that are there when things are good, but have been quite lacking now that things are not good. And so the result is that national government takes most of the decision. Now, national government want to take most of the decision, but still, I'm not advocating that European Union should be a model, but the European Union is, in many ways, a good model for movement of people, movement of goods and services, access sharing, and several good decisions that might be shared then by a larger number of citizens. I look at us as user. I look at us as students, as teachers, as parents, as children, and the individual people need access to medicine, need access to technology, regardless of their nationality and regardless of their location. And so these are really questions that should be put front and right of public policy and human rights, as this conference would like to address. These are basic human rights. And so I think it's crucial that the student at your university, you might live in a remote area, they might have their parents or the grandparents sick with COVID, they have to self-isolate, they have to take care of their parents, they have to keep their community safe, at the same time should not be left behind and should be able to learn at the same, with the same good technology. And so all these questions are very deep questions. We're not going to, of course, to resolve them in this conference, but these are questions that really beg more attention. This pandemic has clearly proven that the world is even more divided between those who have and those who have less. And so how can we try to address these issues, and how can we try to have a bit more equitable redistribution of resources? It's crucial also because nobody's safe until the vaccine really reach everybody, and now a modified vaccine reach everybody. Otherwise, the current vaccine is not good enough against the Delta variant, is proven. And the moment other variants can come, then we go back and we start back from square one, and we need to reinvent, to remodify the vaccine and vaccinate everybody. So the reality is nobody's safe until everyone is safe. Virus don't know borders. Virus cross races, cross genders, cross everything, and put all of us on an equal foot. And so we really have to take a deep and very crucial look at this situation. Another thing that I think this pandemic is proven, and again goes down to human rights and public policy, is the supply chain. International global supply chain have been international trade, not just from an intellectual property standpoint, but also from a international contract, international business transaction standpoint. And so you can clearly see manufacturing disrupted in countries with lockdowns, access to goods becoming more an issue. Now, some goods are less of an issue, and we have been very lucky that the food supplies have now been disrupted, but certainly other goods supply have been disrupted, and certainly the workers in factories have been, particularly in the developing world, workers in the garment factories and in other factories have been severely affected. And why? Because they had to stay home, they couldn't produce, or because developed countries had big lockdown, many contracts were canceled, and so production was not carried on in the same way. And the people at the very beginning of the supply chain, the workers in the factory, are the one who took the highest impact, because they got no salaries. They very often are paid very little, and they don't really have good work infrastructure in terms of contract and protection. And so because of that, they really got, the worst part of the pandemic. That has to be and come out again in the light that, this international supply chain are very unfair towards the workers, at the very beginning of the chain, that get the lowest possible salary very often. There is no human rights, labor rights protecting them. There is a lot of, turning on the other side by the international community. And to a large extent, the COVID pandemic has hit them twice badly, because they have less access to medicine, less access to vaccines, and at the same time, many might have lost their jobs. Some countries have been able to provide more subsidies to their people. I live in Singapore, and again, Singapore is in a very privileged position to be able to subsidize a lot of the businesses that are suffering in this very moment, but many countries cannot do that. And, the food and beverages, hospitality industry has been suffering tremendously. As you know, Bali was living on tourism largely, and now this tourism has been largely, and international tourism cannot happen. And so you can see a lot of businesses truly struggling and a lot of people out of jobs. And so how the law should respond and how all of us should help minimizing the impact of that is something that we really need to think very, very carefully. And so, I really wanted to say that, to you all, because I think this is what we need to think. How the legal infrastructure at the international level was not strong enough to help the world when the world needed the most. Countries have been bickering over vaccine diplomacies, China, the United States, Europe, this vaccine works better, the other one works less. If you take my vaccine, you don't have to quarantine. If you take the other vaccine, you have to quarantine. A lot of things are absolutely unacceptable from a science standpoint, from a human rights standpoint. Country giving other country vaccine, just to establish more, how can I say, long-lasting potential colonization. This is the soft colonization, the vaccine trade colonization. I give you doses, so then you vote in my favor, in the United Nations in some committee or something like that. Or I give you vaccine in order to assert my power versus the other superpower. All of that is really wrong. It's morally and human rights wrong. And I think, in an academic setting, we should be able to discuss these issues. Now, we are not going to change much. We will need to navigate a lot of this politics, but we need to be very aware that you as citizen, we as citizens, need to assess these issues and demand that our government really take good action, and action that is for the people. When it's good time, it's important to have good governance. It's always important to have good governance, but when it's bad time, it's absolutely fundamental to have good governance, both at the national, at the district, local, regional, national, and international level. And so with that, I really think that I want to leave you with this couple of thoughts. Good governance is the number one issue, and we need to improve governance, access to medicine, access to education online and infrastructure, and cooperation. And so all of these have and need to be organized partially better through law, public policy, and a lens of human rights that put people at the very center of this discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for an interesting talk. Now, if anyone has any questions, I'm sure Professor Irene Calboli would be pleased to answer them. Ladies and gentlemen, any question? I have 3 questions from our audience. What do you think about sharing issue related to vaccine of COVID-19?
Well, I think we should. I think we should do much more in terms of sharing information, sharing vaccine, and sharing. Now, again, the real problem is the manufacturing capacity. I think this pandemic has proven that we were making the wrong investment. We as an international community. Now, some country, to make vaccine is difficult. It's a very high tech, particularly this RNA vaccine, this genetically, when you modify, this is the latest technology. They have to be conserved at very high, a very low temperature, and it's not something that you can do in a manufacturing chain easily. They require parts from, in components from many different countries. But I think what has been clearly proven is that every country should have, as a matter of national security, particularly countries that are large enough and have some innovation technology and some science hubs, they do have to have manufacturing capacity for vaccine. Until this pandemic struck, was clear that there was not much money to be made in vaccine. I mean, let's be honest, the world is run by money. And so, a lot of companies and a lot of government didn't really invest in making vaccine because vaccine were made for, traditional diseases. And, when you have one big manufacturer making the measles, the MMR, or the influenza vaccine was enough and was much more profitable to invest in pharmaceutical plants that produce different type of medicine, or now genetically modified and genetic treatment to treat the developed world. When this pandemic struck, we clearly understood that everybody needs to be able to make some vaccine. And what is really interesting is that even India, that is the biggest generic manufacturing for a lot of pharmaceuticals, is not able to make the vaccine by itself. And so, that really proved how crucial it is to keep up and having, particularly for countries again, as big as Indonesia. Indonesia has the capability to invest, in some of this technology for every country. And I'm talking about developed country too, Canada, Italy, look at Europe. There is no capability. And so, a lot of developed countries have really had to face the major issue of not being able to produce on time, this vaccine. You might remember when the pandemic started, we didn't have enough masks. We didn't have enough ventilators. Now, that and, a lot of designers, a lot of people started to sew and produce them home. There've been all sorts of ingenuity, putting 2 or 3 tubes in one respirator. I mean, people have done everything they could to just, deal with the emergency. And some of these now, we have a surplus of masks. That's not a problem. There was an undersupply of oxygen just because, again, but now we're feeling that too. But these are much simpler process to produce. The actual production of the technology that produces the vaccine are much more difficult. And now some of the treatment are also very difficult, the monoclonal and so on. And so this is really where I think the international community has to wake up and understand that we cannot outsource everything in production, and every country really have to invest more in technology. From every bad, sometimes some good comes. And so hopefully, we will see more technology development, more, think about how our community have been able to adapt to Zoom and learn faster how to do online teaching and online. And so, every problem can create opportunity. And so let's hope that's the case. But certainly we need to do more in terms of foreseeing other issues and making sure countries are ready in terms of potentially being able to manufacture. And I think, that needs to be also a bigger wake-up call for developing countries. They cannot rely on developed countries developing things all the time. We need to have more ingenuity and invention and innovation in every place. Otherwise, we are at the mercy of those who develop faster and they might not have enough to share, as this vaccine is clearly showing. And so we do need to have that more as a matter of national policy, I think.
Thank you very much. We have a question from Liana Tupalesi. What do you think about people that don't want to get vaccinated yet? Sorry.
Well, I personally endorse.
I'm sorry. It's not finished, the question.
Sorry.
What do you think about people that don't want to get vaccinated yet? They keep complaining when this pandemic will be over.
Well, as I said, to me, I fully endorse a worldwide mandate for vaccines. We need everybody to be vaccinated. National government should mandate it, or if they don't mandate, should really make. And I don't think there is a legal issue. Now, there are some individuals who really can't have the vaccine because of potential allergic reaction, but these are a very small minority, very, very small, insignificant minority in terms of reaching threshold that really would make everybody safe. And so whoever can and doesn't take the vaccine, so I for 100% endorse green passes. I think these are not illegal. I do believe the law in this case should really push for a mandatory vaccination or green passes. And, like here in Singapore, if you're not vaccinated, you can't go to the restaurant, you can't go to the gym, you can't basically do anything. It's your right to stay home and not be vaccinated. In Italy, my own country, now a proposal will pass in which, teachers, if they're not vaccinated, they just can't teach. And if they can't teach, they will not get paid. And, this is to keep everybody safe. The vaccine is proven to be safe. There have been the FDA approval, and I've been vaccinated and I'm sure, many of you are, and they're safe. And so like we have mandatory vaccination for smallpox and other diseases. We should have mandatory vaccination for COVID-19. And so I think the law has the instrument. We never can predict safety in the next 50 years, but we have clearly assurance that the vaccine is safe. And so there is no reason why government can't impose it or can't impose it as a threshold for normal activity by individuals. And then individuals will decide whether or not they want to take the vaccine. There is a variety of vaccines. I think some are superior in quality and efficacy, others are less. But any vaccine is fine because they actually help the community. So I think now is the time to really understand that the law should protect communities, not just the individual. So this is a bit of a communal right. Safety is a public good. It's not a private individual right. And safety of our community, safety of our children. Think about the fact that, unvaccinated individuals are a danger for everybody else because they can carry the virus, but also, and then they can get worse sick, they get higher viral charges, and then I might be vaccinated, but my child who is below 12 cannot be vaccinated. My elder parents, even if they're vaccinated, can still get the bad version of the disease. And so, your freedom can be the death of somebody in my family, and that's unacceptable. So freedom is understanding that there is somebody else's freedom too. And so I think in this very issue, the public good of communal safety has to be safeguarded above everything. And the public good of communal safety requires people to vaccinate. And if people decide not to, they should be extracted from the community and isolated, because the community needs the vaccine and treatment for people. And so, have strong governance in this respect is actually fulfilling the public good, not trying to impose anything on people, I believe.
Thank you very much. I have one more question. In your opinion, what is the best dispute resolution related to vaccine patent right between two countries?
Well, I don't think in practice we're going to see that dispute. But let's assume if there was a dispute between two countries, I probably think that we could have a multiplicity of resolution. We could have judicial, so we could have, no courts resolution, as well as we could have arbitration, international arbitration. Let's make the hypothetical that there is a patent on the vaccine in many jurisdictions. And now Indonesia does a compulsory license of the patent. Even without the WTO waiver, we could still have, compulsory licensing. Indonesia has done compulsory licensing in the past. India has done it. Thailand has done it. And so now, the company that has being issued a compulsory license could actually have an avenue to go to the national courts. They would likely lose. So I think if the vaccine will be patented, and if there is the possibility to take compulsory licensing, the process is the usual, and the adjudication will be the courts or arbitration. But the problem is that even if there is compulsory licensing, there is still not the ability to make the vaccine in practice. And so this is really the issue here. And so I don't think this is an IP issue. I don't really think this is an IP issue. But we need also to remember something, and I think this is part of the discussion. We cannot keep expropriating all the time things that are useful. Let's assume we could have the capability. Well, we expropriate one time the vaccine, 2 times another vaccine, 3 times something else. Eventually the company are not going to do it anymore, because they will find, why should I invest into making pharmaceutical? They are going to make more Louis Vuitton or other bags or things that are non-useful, but they are ornamental, but there are rich people who will buy them, and they can make more money doing that. And so the real question is how we promote innovation, long-standing innovation that can sustain the market, because there is major cost in terms of R&D, in terms of clinical trial. There are major costs, and this company face this cost, and they have to make back profit. Then the next question is, how much is enough? But there is no reason why the pharmaceutical maker should make less profit than the luxury bags make. Why should people who make lamps or furniture or food in restaurant or silk or bags not be controlled or publicly shamed while the makers of pharmaceuticals should? If I'm an entrepreneur and an investor, I start to very carefully think about this question. Why should I be told I'm an assassin if I don't want to share my medicine? And nobody tells, Louis Vuitton they're an assassin to make a lot of money, out of rich people, when they could actually put the same money to develop medicine. And so this is the danger. We should promote good innovation. We should not think that the expropriation model is a long-term model, because it's not. You know, no communist country has been able to sustain good saving life innovation. Now, on the other side, too much privatization, too much market economy is also not working. So the system is a mix. You see, it's this balance, this magic balance between public and private, and how we make it work for the greater good. But the reality is that, you know, individual people might be very good, but the world is driven by profits, and it's very hard unless you're a very small country like Singapore is, and you have very good leadership. But you need to be small, and you have to have very good leadership to be very, very big. With a lot of issues, you know, Indonesia, the United States, Europe, and so on, it's very hard to have strong governance. And then strong governance is often resented. And so, you know, this is a complex issue, but I think that we really need to understand that medicine and treatment don't come out of the vacuum. You know, there is a lot of money invested in creating these things, and so companies have to recover. They have to recover the cost, and they have to make profit, and you know, and otherwise they would not do it. Otherwise the talent would go somewhere else. And so, you know, as much as this might be pragmatic and perhaps a bit cynical, we need to be pragmatic and cynical to have the best innovation for everybody. Because again, remember, if today we have the best vaccine, is because developed countries such as the United States, that might be very bad for a lot of things, but they had the best scientists, many foreigners, many non-American, the best scientists from all over the world, go there, develop, because there is a good infrastructure and ecosystem. And because of that, then the rest of the world gets the best medicine, but not with the same access. And so this is the question. You know, we can't think that things just happen in the vacuum. Things happen because of a lot of studies, because of a lot of education, the top research, and because of investment. And so we need to very much incentivize that in every country. We need to incentivize that. And how we do that? Tough. I believe in public. I do genuinely believe in public. But public has proven to be very corrupt as well. So we do need to have the private checking the public checking the private. So, you know, the public-private partnership collaboration between the two. I'm speaking very openly because I think, you know, we need to be very pragmatic in these issues. We can't, you know, hide behind the wall of diplomacy too much, because nothing gets done otherwise. And now is the time in which the world needs action. It needs enlightened and good action driven by good public policy with a lens of human rights to help everybody.
Thank you very much, Professor Irene Calboli. Thank you very much for your kindness. We hope you enjoyed having this interactive session, and we look forward to having you in future conference. Thank you very much.
Terima kasih.
Sami. Ladies and gentlemen, now I'm giving back the board to our MC, Miss Lina Herlina.